Hi, fellow lost souls, and welcome once again to the 10th World. On this channel, I discuss the factions that design, engineer, and build the worlds we explore in our games, movies, and stories. Since we all need to eat, and I like to eat, I thought I'd talk about food a little bit today. Specifically, I want to talk about eating, drinking, and cooking in the world of Valheim, and the stories and traditions that inspired it. As a warning, this video does contain spoilers for the story of Valheim. Alright, to the kitchen. We wake in the cold stone circle in the 10th world, chilled and forgetful. We do not know where we are or why we're here yet. All will be explained in time. We may wander, and soon we feel a familiar feeling deep in our gut, hunger. We'd almost forgotten that as well. Here, it will not let us forget. Here, we must gather and hunt, prepare and cook. We have to learn these things once more if we're to survive the challenges put before us. In our own world, food's been something that we use to honor and celebrate. We eat to honor the gods and spirits. We feast together in celebration of prosperous times of the year. We give gifts of food to friends and prize hospitality shown to our guests, not only out of respect, but as a show of our own blessings. We take ingredients and with great skill turn them into combinations of tastes and textures that transform the experience of eating from a mechanical and chemical function required for us to live into a form of art. We surround the farming and storage of food with spiritual significance, and if the harvest isn't good, we might make a sacrifice to appease the gods and spirits. In Valheim, we begin with nothing. We have to find food in order to survive, and while some foods are plentiful, such as berries and mushrooms, we soon find that they won't sate us enough to face the harder challenges we'll encounter in the 10th world. We have to get better at hunting and cooking and eventually brewing if we're to succeed against the Forsaken and make our way to Valhalla. We'll have to learn the land just as our ancestors did, what it can provide, and how we can obtain and use it. One of the best examples of food carried by our ancestors when they crossed the sea was fish. They would smoke and dry or salt fish to be carried with them as a provision and would eat this to sustain themselves on their long journeys. Explorers in the Viking Age required more than just fish to survive though, and when they made landfall on lands far from home and without settlement, they had to work hard to find the nutrients they required. Settling such lands was hard work, and one needed not just calories but things like fats to give energy for building and surviving in harsh conditions. Other nutrients would be needed as well. The simplest foods one could find or make at the time and in those conditions would be fruits and nuts, meat from fish or game to be cooked over a fire, and bread or porridge of some kind made from local grains. These may well have been cooked and prepared without much thought to the experience of eating in times of survival, but eventually the skilled and artful among our ancestors began to prepare their food in more complex ways. This has created new cultural traditions, some still extant among the peoples who descended from the settlers in ancient times. This takes time, and when you awake in the 10th world, you will, like them, not have time to focus on the quality of your dining experience. Before you can do much cooking, you have to gather enough supplies to sustain yourself here in the 10th world. The foods in Valheim offer buffs and effects, but for now, we can't worry too much about that. The buffs you get from eating what you find are helpful, but they are, at this point, just bonuses to the primary effect, which is keeping you alive and able to move. Now, forgetting to eat in Valheim won't cause you to die on its own. This is in contrast to our world where you will eventually starve, though it can take a lot of time, especially if you have access to water. Eating food will restore some lost health, give you more hit points to cushion you against attacks and falling from height, something that happens pretty often, and it'll give you stamina. Stamina in Valheim is used during almost every action you take. It regenerates over time, but when you run out, you can't take any actions, including moving or walking. Certain status effects change the way stamina works, such as encumbrance, which causes your stamina not to regenerate, or being rested, which boosts your stamina regeneration. This is why it's important to find a number of foods in the wild that can sustain you. If you run out of stamina during a fight, your enemies will quickly take advantage and slay you. You have 3 food slots, which fill when you eat a combination of different foods. Their effects will stack, so you can have 3 foods active for a time. They will run out though, and you'll become hungry again. Your basic survival foods as you begin your journey will be raspberries and mushrooms. They spawn in the meadows and can be easily plucked from the ground or harvested from bushes. As you explore, you'll want to gather as much of these simple resources as you can. They'll keep your stamina up and your sword arm swinging when you're challenged by an enemy. After you've made your first real weapons, you'll begin to hunt boar, neck, and deer. These will drop hides and meat that you can cook to get much better bonuses than simple raw foods. Just as you make your way in the wilds, our ancestors had to survive as well. Once they had learned to keep themselves and their families alive, they began to take a closer look at their food and what they could do with it. Sources of information regarding food at this time in our history are usually worth being skeptical about. Some were written long after the periods they are describing, and though many stories pass down through oral tellings, details are often changed as they pass from person to person. It is of high likelihood that the warriors and settlers in the Viking Age took their foraged vegetables and hunted meats and put them together in the form of simple stews and soups. Agricultural practices then likely led to a wider variety of such foods to be grown and raised, leading to more complex recipes of this kind. Reenactors of the age, using what written sources are available, as well as discoveries about what sorts of tools were available at the time, often portray the everyday diet of these people in this way. Meat seems to have played a larger role in the daily diet of most of these cultures than it might have among the laboring classes in longer settled lands. Meats might be roasted or placed into a pot with vegetables. Fish were dried and smoked as they had done long ago in their homelands. The Norse explorers of the Viking Age may have preferred to boil their foods more than they liked to roast or char them. Boiling, in fact, may have been their primary means of cooking food. Many of these traditions are carried on today, especially among those actively trying to keep the traditions of old alive. The foods that our ancestors ate were many and varied, and settlements distant from one another often developed their own traditions of foraging, farming, hunting, and cooking. The food available in the 10th world is a little easier to manage, though there's a great variety of it, and you'll have to learn to prioritize. Carrying enough food to keep your stamina up will be your focus in the beginning, but you will find that it does not in time suit your needs. As I mentioned before, each food item grants some effect. Usually they'll boost both stamina and health, but each food will grant more of one than the other, so you'll have to choose wisely. Some foods will grant a more balanced amount of each, which will be more effective in certain situations. As you face greater and greater challenges and your margins of survival decrease, you'll have to be diligent in selecting which food effects you have active to ensure that you're best prepared to fight. Foods are divided into tiers based on the areas that they're found, and the areas that become available to you as you progress through your fights with the Forsaken. Food from more challenging areas has an increased magnitude of effect, meaning that you'll want to find or make these items when you start going into more dangerous areas. Each area will give you foods that are best for health, stamina, or a balanced approach. Eventually, you'll find foods that grant A tier. Those we will discuss later. You'll begin in the meadows region, where you'll find raspberries and mushrooms, honey, as well as neck, deer, and boar meats, as mentioned earlier. These are your tier 1 foods. They'll keep you going, but won't be as useful later on. The Black Forest will give you access to carrots, new types of berries and mushrooms as well, which can be cooked into new recipes, besides being just eaten on their own. In the swamps, you'll find turnips readily available, which you can farm yourself. You can hunt other creatures as well. You'll progress in this way through the mountains, plains, mistlands, and ashlands. Each of these will provide not just new foods you can find, but you'll also learn new recipes that you can make with them. But what if you want to change the foods you've already consumed? You want different effects. Surely you can just eat more food in a different combination. Of course, you can try, but often you'll be too full. You'll not be able to change your foods until the hunger timers come down. This is a shame, because the drake flying overhead isn't going to wait for you to rest up a bit before blowing icy breath down on you. If you've been diligently collecting foods as you travel, you'll likely have come across something called bukeberries. The name renders them slightly unpalatable, and indeed they may be. Eating them will cause you to, well, not be full anymore. Once your active food effects are purged, you can add more in the combination that you want. You may want to wash your mouth first, though. Once you've procured your ingredients, learned the foods that will help you, and can cook them, you may be bored eating alone. You might come across other travelers in the 10th world, and when you do, you can finally show off your cool fortress and share with them your bounty. You'll learn to create feasts. These are large meals that you can cook that have longer durations and can be shared with others. They take more ingredients. You must trade with the bog witch for some of them, and you must build food preparation tables. More on that later. Feasts in the 10th world have many benefits, but our ancestors held feasts as well. They did so for some of the same reasons, and sometimes for different ones. While the everyday meals of the household were prepared on an open hearth or fire, often in a longhouse for the sustenance of the families living there, feasting played a part in Norse culture as well, as it still does today. A highly regarded virtue of the time was the practice of hospitality. Preparing food to share with guests could bring friends closer together and was an enjoyable way to pass time among friends and extended family. It might also be a way for some households to show off their wealth for those so inclined. Who could put on the bigger feast may gain in reputation as a result. This motif often appeared in stories and legends of the gods and creatures of the realms. Feasts may well have been a time when stories and music were enjoyed and passed from person to person, spreading legends and tales of heroes and monsters. Many of the legends we remember of these people were likely told across a roaring fire on a cold night when the wind whipped snow against the roof and through the trees. Feasts might also be held, much as they are today, to mark important dates and times. The Norse, for instance, often held seasonal festivals, including those at midwinter. Some of these traditions may have been passed down to form the basis for some of our modern traditions around this time of year. Being a people with many gods, they also likely engaged in ritual feasts, dedicating the eating and the drinking to the gods whose favors they sought during times of difficulty or struggle. Their gods may well have answered them. Sometimes perhaps not, though we can never know for sure. In the 10th world, the powers summoned by those who prepare and consume certain foods vary much less in form, but are much easier to spot and predict. If you choose the path of magic and begin using items that require aether, you'll need to craft foods that grant you aether in addition to health and stamina. These foods include things like stuffed mushrooms, Yggdrasil porridge, and Seeker aspic in the Mistlands area. As you make your way to the Ashlands, you'll need to make things such as sizzling berry broth, sparkling shroom shakes, and marinated greens. If you run out of aether, your magic items will be useless. These foods require ingredients that can be challenging to acquire, so use them wisely. Ingredients that require a physical challenge to get a hold of are used in our own world as well. The biggest challenge for our ancestors in this regard, though, was not necessarily the strength of the enemy they had to defeat. It was learning to find and grow foods during the appropriate seasons, and finding ways to store them at times when they could not find or produce more. Many of these foods were precious and often represented the needs of one season or another. As seasons changed and winter turned lands of plenty into freezing, wind-scraped places, settlers in these areas had to adapt their farming and gathering habits. Farming of produce was practiced for a long time. It's likely that what fruit and vegetables were available were more often wild than cultivated, though. This means that food would have to be gathered and stored in warmer times to last through the cold months. Meats were often dried using fire or sometimes brined and stored in the home to last through the winter. Winter came just after harvest time, so that means that processed grain would be available, and it's likely that dried herbs were kept as well to add flavor to blander dishes. Dairy products were important and cows were kept fed for milk. In the colder regions, late winter would be a time when fish could be caught as well. Some hunting likely occurred during winter, though it seems that they mostly sustained themselves on stored vegetables and dairy products and grain. The dark and cold times of the year likely meant that they had access to fewer foods. It was likely a time of blander meals with rarer ingredients used sparingly or during a feast. Again, the quality of sources on the subject is mixed, but it's clear that when they were able, the Norse settlers like us today learned and passed down many traditions of food preparation and storage that are still in use. Cooking is an art that requires a lot of learning and skill. However, to cook properly and safely, you also need some special tools. When you begin your journey, you'll be cold and without shelter. You have to build a roof from sticks and grass, and beneath it, a small fire to warm yourself and on which you can cook your food. Setting up a cooking station over the fire will allow you to cook your meats. You'll use this tool for the entirety of your journey to roast what you hunt, but in time, you may place them over larger fires and braziers to create a large and functional kitchen. Be careful and watch when you're cooking in this way. If you leave your food over the fire for too long, it'll burn, and you'll have nothing but charcoal left. Remove it when the fire flares. You can only place 2 pieces of meat on each station at a time, but you may build more than one. Once you've learned to smelt tin, you'll learn to make a cauldron. Like a cooking station, it has to be placed over a fire, and it can be upgraded with a number of different stations to improve its performance. With it, you can create a number of new dishes, from stews and soups to jams. You'll then be able to begin crafting mead brewing equipment, which I'll discuss later in the video. From iron, fine wood, and leather, you can learn to craft the food preparation table, which will allow you to create feasts. It'll also allow you to create preparations which can be cooked at other stations. If you want to take up fishing, you may also want to craft some bait at this table. In time, your regular cooking station will prove too small to cook all the meats that you'll acquire while hunting and fighting enemies. You'll want to create an iron cooking station. This requires 2 small fires or a hearth to function, and you can hold larger cuts of meat on it. It can also hold 5 pieces to cook instead of just 2. In time, you'll learn to build a stone oven. This item lets you cook items you may have prepared using your food preparation table, such as breads, meat platters, and pies. You'll want to ensure that you have the optimal combinations of foods ready for when you face the toughest battles. Food's not the only thing, though, that can give us courage or strength. Sometimes we want something a little stronger. This was the case for our ancestors as well, who learned the art of brewing. The settlers and explorers of the Viking era brought with them many traditions from their homelands, the knowledge of the brewing of mead having been very important. Mead was made from honey, which for a long time had to be harvested in the wild using techniques to track in open hives. Today, we might use packaged yeast to ferment our mead, but such things were not available to our ancestors. It's likely that many of the brewers of the time were unaware of what was causing the process to occur. Wild yeast was often the reason for fermentation during this time. Easily captured from the air or on the skins of certain fruits and plants, it was also unpredictable, as many strains might be present. When a particularly desirable batch was produced, some of the fermenting yeast cells were often saved and used to make a new batch if possible. In fact, there are stories of the process of fermentation being described by those who witnessed it without knowledge of the finer details as being facilitated by the gods themselves. Mead, therefore, and for other reasons, was of great cultural significance to the Norse people. While these people did not invent it, its roots go back much farther. They formed an attachment to it and are forever associated with the process and the product. It was drunk for pleasure and for ritual. It was a sealer of contracts, and therefore was often provided during wedding ceremonies. The drinking of mead often accompanied feasting, and this again plays an important part in some of the legends and stories passed down to us from those long ago. The meads in Valheim offer many benefits, beyond just enjoyment or celebration. In order to make them, you'll require the main ingredient, honey. Honey is obtained from farming bees. You have to find a beehive in an abandoned structure or in a swamp and break it to capture the queen. Be mindful that you're ready to take some damage because they'll not allow you to pass without defending themselves. Once the hive's broken and you have obtained the queen, you can build your first hives and begin to farm honey. The hives produce honey quickly, and you'll easily obtain a lot of it, even from a single hive. Honey is also a useful ingredient in some food recipes. Once you have your honey farm, you'll want to build a place to brew. You'll need walls, a roof, and a fire to begin. You'll build both a mead kettle and a fermenter, and these will be the tools with which you make your mead. From the mead kettle, you can choose the mead base you want to craft. This will require your honey and a number of other ingredients. The mead base will determine what type of mead you create. You can choose many types, from healing meads of different potency to stamina boosting meads to meads that grant you resistance to the cold or fire. These effects will be useful in your fights. You may also purchase some strange ingredients from the Bog Witch that will allow you to create meads that grant other boons. Animal Whisperer's mead allows you to tame animals faster. Ratatosk mead increases your speed, while Berserk mead will give you great stamina at the cost of some protection. These are a few of the strange recipes. There are many others. The food and drink of our ancestors was important, not just for their survival, but for what it meant socially and culturally. The same is very much true today. We don't just eat to live, we eat to be social, to share with one another, to celebrate holidays, to honor the dead, and all sorts of other reasons. We also make food from some of the weirdest things and some of the weirdest combinations. We don't exactly have an HP bar, but I can't deny that a great pizza or like some soup definitely feels like it heals you when you need it. In Valheim, your goal is clear, your path laid out before you. You must defeat the Forsaken one by one. The foods you craft and eat are there to help you do this, but there will be times in between when you wander the forests and spend time in your house. At those times, there's more to this world than fighting and killing. At those times, it may feel like home, and there's nothing that makes a home feel happy than some good food, especially if you have someone to share it with. Those are my thoughts on food and cooking in Valheim and the stories that inspired it. I want to thank you all for watching. I appreciate everyone who does. I hope you really enjoyed the topic and get a chance to enjoy some Viking Age cooking for yourselves. If you liked the video, please hit like. And if you don't want your food to keep catching fire, hit subscribe. If you've ever tried some Viking Age cooking, let me know in the comments down below. Oh, and before you go, I want to give a shout out to my patrons who help support the channel. Our $10 patron is Wasuki at the artisan level. If you want to get your name in the credits, head on over and sign up. The Patreon link is in the description. You'll get access to an exclusive Discord as well. And remember, if the water isn't safe to drink, there's always mead. Alright, thanks everyone. Bye, Internet.